Okay, I think we can go ahead and get started now. There might be some folks coming in. I'll get to introductions and we have a presentation momentarily, but I do want to note that this webinar is being recorded. If any attendees have any questions, there's a Q&A feature. We would highly encourage you to utilize that Q&A feature throughout the presentation, but we will also have an opportunity for Q&A at the end of the presentation as well. Geneva, any other logistics I may have left out? Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen then and start the presentation, and we can do some quick introductions. And Geneva, I believe you have some opening remarks. So maybe while I get the presentation started, if you would like to take it away, please feel free to do so.
Sounds good. I'll see you, everyone, and good afternoon. Really appreciate you all spending your afternoon with us to talk about next steps in Assembly Bill 2022 implementation. I know that many of you joining the call here today have put in countless hours into this work over the past 2.5 years, and I'm just so deeply appreciative of all of your hard work in identifying SQ named features across your areas, as well as working closely with California Native American tribes and community members on identifying replacement names to those spaces. I know it's a considerable amount of work, and we are so close to the finish line. And just from the bottom of my heart, really appreciate how much dedication everyone's put into this. And then also the patience and kindness and collaborative effort and energies that people have brought to the work. So just a huge thank you for everything that you all have done. As Megan mentioned, my name is Geneva E.V. Thompson. I'm a citizen of the Cherokee Nation, she, her pronouns, and I serve as the Deputy Secretary for Tribal Affairs at the California Natural Resources Agency, and also very honored to serve as the Chair of the California Advisory Committee on Geographic Names. And have been working very closely with Deputy Director Megan Fleer, who is also has another hat on of acting manager for the California Advisory Committee on Geographic Names. And it's just been a real pleasure to work with the staff, the committee members of the advisory committee, and working through all of this. I know that Megan has a wonderful PowerPoint presentation she has prepared for us, talking about the work that everyone has done up to now in the implementation of this new law, and then has a great panel of speakers who can share their roles and responsibilities in the next steps of AB 2022 and provide helpful resources, information to support your all's work in seeing this over the finish line. Something I just want to highlight on that like 10,000 foot level space before we get into the weeds and get into those next steps is just the importance of working closely with California Native American tribes, the importance of working with communities across the state of California to really think through the histories of our areas, the histories of the naming conventions used across the landscape, and having these conversations around how do we want our landscapes to reflect the values that we have as a community, the values that we have as Californians, and how do we ensure that we are shaping a world where people can feel safe, included, and respected throughout their lives. And Assembly Bill 2022 and the identification of SQ term as offensive and derogatory term, and tasking the committee and all of us here on the call today to do this work, I think is just one example of how we as Californians, we as the state of California can start to grapple with those historical wrongs and start to grapple with what does healing look like for all of us, so we can have a future that that is inclusive, that takes us to the space that we want to be on. And so I'm very touched about how much work has gone into this. I've learned so much throughout this past 2.5 years, hearing from you all, hearing the considerations that public agencies have to take into account when going through these processes, when renaming areas. And I know it's given me a better understanding of how we as a society live in relation to, with each other, how we as society members live in relation with each other. And I just wanted to say thank you for all of the expertise and guidance that you all have shared with me and helping me grow as a person and as an individual throughout this work. And I hope that you all have found it meaningful as well. And I hope that the communities you represent here today have found this work to be meaningful because it's an exciting time and the conversations are powerful. And I just wanted to take a moment to thank you all and thank you for your work. And a huge appreciation for Megan, who to put in countless hours carrying this over the finish line. And I know that she's got a lot of information to share with us. Please know the Q&A feature is available for you. We have a wide panel of experts that are here today that can help answer questions and can help get to the final steps in the renaming efforts across the state as it relates to SQ terms. I saw a chat in there that the Q&A feature might not be working, so please use the chat feature if that Q&A feature is actually is not available. And I apologize and thank you for your understanding as we navigate these tech issues. So with that, Watto, thank you again for being here. And Megan, I'll hand it off to you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, we may have to do a little bit more troubleshooting, but in any case, I will round out our introductions. So you just heard from Deputy Secretary Geneva E.B. Thompson, who is also the Kagan Chair, as well as the Deputy Secretary for Tribal Affairs, Fleur Son. Hello, everyone. My name is Megan Fleer. I'm the Deputy Director for Tribal Affairs at the California Natural Resources Agency. And I have also been acting Kagan Manager for the past couple of months or so. So I've been working very closely with a fair number of you. And I'm just to echo Geneva, so thankful for the continued coordination and communication and everything that's gone into this. So I will go through next our agenda for today's presentation. And as Deputy Secretary mentioned, we do have a number of speakers who can hopefully help answer questions. And if not, we can collect those questions and try to find answers at a later date as well. But in any case, I will just give a quick overview of today's agenda and go from there. So first, I will provide, I'm sure we're all very familiar at this point, but just in case we're not, a brief overview of Assembly Bill 2022. Then a summary of the implementation that's been done regarding the bill to date. And then the large portion of this webinar really is focused on what resources are available for public agencies, members of the public, tribes who may be potentially affected by Assembly Bill 2022 or just in general. I will say a lot of these resources are also things that I learned about that I will probably use later on in life if I ever move. And then we'll round out the presentation with just a summary of next steps, and then we'll have an opportunity for Q&A. Okay. And Geneva and others, if you do see questions in the chat, if you wouldn't mind just helping either answering them or kind of keeping tabs on it till later. I can't see the chat right now. So if anything does come up, are there any audio or other technical issues, just feel free to pipe up and let me know.
Thanks, Megan.
Okay.
Definitely on it.
Thank you. Okay. So overview of Assembly Bill 2022. Governor Newsom signed Assembly Bill 2022, which was written by Assemblymember James Ramos on September 23rd, 2022. The term squaw, which we'll refer to after this as the SQ term, is a racist and derogatory term that has historically been used as an offensive ethnic, racial, and sexist slur, particularly for Indigenous women. And the bill designates this SQ term to be racist, derogatory, insulting, and offensive, and further states No geographic feature or place name in the state of California should have a name that includes racial and sexual slurs and stereotypes targeting Native Americans, which perpetuate prejudice, disparage racial minorities, and contribute to the current crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous people. Some mandates, this is just a summary of some of the mandates from the bill. So beginning on the January 1st of 2025, which is coming up pretty quickly here, the SQ term shall be removed from all geographic features and place names in the state. Public agencies may no longer replace any sign, interpretive marker, or any other marker printed material with the discontinued name. And replacement names are to be selected in consultation with California Native American tribes and shall prioritize names that honor and recognize tribes, tribal cultures, and indigenous languages that are specific to the geographic region of that particular feature or place. A few additional mandates. Kagan shall vote on the proposed replacement names and may reject a proposed name if the committee determines that it is offensive or insulting. And if a public agency fails to provide a replacement name or the provided name is deemed to be offensive or insulting by the committee, Kagan, at its discretion and in consultation with advisory bodies, may recommend a replacement name. So that's a summary of the bill. And then I will provide an overview of implementation to date. Again, on September 23rd, 2022, the bill was signed. Between that point in time and July 1st of 2023, Kagan solicited input for geographic features and place names containing the SQ term. So there was a lot of outreach that happened with public agencies, tribes, members of the public to collect those names to identify existing geographic features or places containing that term. And that solicitation essentially closed on July 1st, 2023. Then February 6, 2024, Kagan notified public agencies of names that were located within their jurisdictions and requiring replacement per Assembly Bill 2022. After which Kagan and public agencies conducted tribal consultations and community outreach to solicit additional input on what those replacement names should be. And again, trying to meet the terms of the bill to honor tribes, tribal cultures, and indigenous languages. And then on August 6th is when Kagan requested submittal of all of those replacement names from the responsible public agencies. And then lastly, this month, and then November 14th of last month, Kagan voted on all of the replacement names that were submitted. So with that said, again, there was a ton of partnership with tribes and public agencies, and through all of these efforts, there were nearly 40 places and features throughout the state containing the SQ term that were identified in approximately 16 counties throughout the state. And so we wanted to say, Hayumasi, thank you so much to all of the agencies, many of which, actually all of which are listed on this slide, as well as the many tribes who consulted with us and worked very closely to identify replacement names and just keep tabs on the whole process. It was a lot of effort and many different cogs and wheels coming together for the implementation of this bill. So just a huge thank you to everyone, to echo what Deputy Secretary Thompson previously said. With that, you will be able to find a list of the Kagan approved replacement names on Kagan's website. I will note that we are still publishing that, but you have a link on the slide here where you can find that final list of Kagan approved names once we publish it, which we're hoping to do very soon. And then in addition, if you need additional information in the interim, or if you really want to just go back and listen to those Kagan meetings where Kagan voted on replacement names, we have 2 links and 2 recordings that are posted on YouTube from both meetings. And I think hopefully folks are also placing that link in the chat. If it's not there, look to the chat and we'll make sure to put it in there in just a second.
They're in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Secretary. Again, I can't see, so I appreciate the communication. Okay. So for the key component of our webinar today is really just focusing on available resources and the what now. All of these names have had approved replacement names. Now what? How does this impact you all? The first resource I want to talk about today is our FAQ, which we're calling an address change FAQ. There's a link on the slide here, and this link will take you to a document that contains some really helpful information if you are someone affected by the bill or any other name changes, or, you know, honestly, if you just plan to move soon. It has a really good list of other agencies, entities, and things one should consider when making address updates. So highly, highly encourage you all to utilize this resource. It's on Kagan's website. And again, the link is right here, and then it is or will be in the chat shortly. Okay. Part of updating one's address is also obviously going to impact key agencies like the DMV. So with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to Amy Tanner, who is the Assistant Deputy Director of Legislation with the DMV, just to give a quick introduction and some helpful hints and opportunities for if you need to update your address. Amy, feel free to unmute, and if you wouldn't mind just doing a quick introduction before you get started.
Thank you, Megan. Wonderful. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Amy Tanner. I'm the excuse me, Assistant Deputy Director of Legislation here for DMV. So longtime DMV employee here and frequent mover myself. So hopefully this information will be helpful to your individuals in your communities who are affected by the street names being changed and such. In general, if you change your address for any reason, you're required to notify the Department of Motor Vehicles for your driver license and your vehicle registration. This ensures that we get you your documents. One of the, I think, largest issue we have is that folks don't change their address with us and then they don't receive their registration notices or their driver license notices. So it is very important to keep your information up to date. Us. We do not know where you live unless you tell us. The good thing about this is that there's no field office visit required to change your address with DMV. In fact, we would suggest you do not visit a field office and complete your change of address online. It's quick and simple. You can do your driver license record and all of your vehicles at the same time. Our website is www.dmv.ca.gov. And if you go there and click online services, you'll be able to find this and get this changed quickly. There are a few exceptions to those who are able to complete their change of address online. For example, disabled person parking placards need to be completed. The change needs to be completed via mail, as well as, say, people with leased vehicles. They're ineligible, but all of that information is listed clearly on our website for customers to review. If you cannot use the change of address online system, you can submit us a form. The PDF of that form is available to download on our website on the change of address page, so no need to hunt for it. It also contains the address where you can send that. Once we receive it, we will process it. Important to note for DMV is that we are not going to send you an updated driver license, ID card, or registration document when you change your address. We will receive your billing notices, renewal notices, etc. at the updated address. And when you renew that document, it will come with the new address. There are no fees to make the change. I saw that pop up at the same time. Absolutely no fees to make just a simple change of address. Should you need to replace your driver license and have it show the new address, I know in certain locations, parking parking passes, or, in schools, you need to have the document showing the updated address. You can request a duplicate driver license online for a fee. You can also request a replacement registration card for a fee on our website. You can also make complete those transactions at any of the kiosks and various locations throughout the state. They're generally in grocery stores. There's a map of those on our website as well. But I think the main message we want to get across to folks is to go online to our website first. Make sure you're at www.dmv.ca.gov and try and conduct the majority of your business online. Nearly over 90% of transactions can be completed without coming into our field office. And in fact, if you are, say, trying to change your driver license address, we will not process that in the field office. We may take paper form from you there, but we won't actually complete that transaction at a window. So that is what I have, Megan. If I can happily answer questions in the Q&A or chat as they come up. And if there is not anything else, I'll turn it back over to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Amy. That was incredibly helpful. And yeah, just to reiterate, Amy and other speakers throughout our webinar today will be available at the end as well for any questions that may pop up. So thank you, Amy.
And just to jump in, I think also the DMV is an opportunity to update your voter registration too. Is that correct, Amy?
Correct. Everyone who submits a change of address for your driver license or ID card will be offered the opportunity to register to vote or change your voter registration information. So we can take 2 items off your checklist there with the Secretary of State.
Excellent. One-stop shop. Okay, thank you, Geneva, for mentioning that before I moved on. Anything else on working with the DMV? Hearing none. Okay, I will keep going. Another great entity to work with, and I think this one really is probably going to apply more for our public agencies, but that is the Commission on State Mandates. So a common question we have received is, does the bill provide any reimbursement to entities or members of the public having financial implications associated with, say, updating your address? So the bill does state reimbursements to local agencies and school districts may be available if the Commission on State Mandates determines that Assembly Bill 2022 contains costs mandated by the state pursuant to Part 7, commencing with Section 17500 of Division 4 of Title II of the Government Code. I know that was a little bit of a mouthful, but hopefully we'll have some easier terms to navigate in just a second here. Essentially, what all of that means is that we would highly encourage you to work directly with the Commission on State Mandates. So we do have the Commission on State Mandates website up here on the slide, and their website is fantastic. And I can say from having had personal calls to ask about the process, they have a YouTube link, they have a guidance document, they have additional guidance materials that are all on that site right here where the link is mentioned. And one thing that I did want to note, though, especially if you are a public agency or school district thinking about filing a claim for reimbursements associated with this bill, there are specific timelines for when claims need to be filed. So please be sure to take a look at the Commission on State Mandates guidance documents and make sure that you're aware of those timelines, which my understanding is that they may differ depending on certain conditions. And lastly, you can also contact the Commission on State Mandates directly. There's an email and a phone number listed below. Again, they are highly helpful, have a wealth of information. We do have Jill McGee. Jill, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your last name.
That's perfect.
But I hope. Oh, good. Okay. We do have Jill on the line as well to answer any questions. But Jill, is there anything that I forgot to mention or that you would like to add to this slide.
Well, as I was listening, I just went through some regulation text that might be helpful because I noticed on your list that you have several cities and counties. So there's a couple of requirements in order for something to become reimbursable. One of the things you'll find in many bills that are signed by the governor, a phrase that indicates if the Commission on State Mandates determines, et cetera, the reimbursability of a program. However, in order for the Commission on State Mandates to make a determination, a test claim must be filed. We have more details on our website that describe exactly what a test claim is. But in general, a test claim operates similarly to a class action lawsuit. And I'll copy and paste into the chat just a few really key regulations that you want to be aware of in order to determine which group might decide that they want to file the test claim. There's only one that is filed, so it would not be the case that every city or every county files their own test claim. There would need to be an identification process amongst a group of which one wants to be the filer, although it is possible for there to be a joint claim if multiple cities or counties want to join together and file a joint test claim. So the first one is Government Code Section 17564, and I'll copy the text of that and a link to LegInfo into the chat. So the first piece is that there has to be $1,000 of costs. So as you're going through the decision process of which city, which county will be the test claimant, you need to identify which one has at least $1,000 of costs. The second is the requirement that there's a time frame within which the test claim must be filed. And that's pursuant to the Commission on State Mandates regulations in section 1183.1, which I'll copy and paste that also and a link to it into the chat. And I'll just copy this whole thing and then say it after I copy it. So the second requirement is that you have 12 months, 365 days following the effective date of the statute or executive order, or within 12 months, 365 days of first incurring increased costs as a result of a statute or executive order, whichever is later. So these two different time windows capture cases in which particular legislation maybe rolls out over time. And maybe the entity that decided that it would be the test claimant, maybe it had not incurred any costs until maybe several years into the process. It also is the case that we receive test claims where they're waiting to see, are they going to have $1,000 of costs? So that window can impact that determination process. Keep in mind, it just needs to be estimated costs. It does not need to be actual costs, but it does require $1,000. The second piece is that there's a certain group of persons who are eligible to file on behalf of the local agency. So in the case of a county, and I noticed on your list you had several counties, it must be the auditor controller or the director of finance. So for folks that are coming from a county, you'll want to discuss whether or not your county would be the test claimant with your auditor controller. Or if it's a city, it must be the city manager, director of finance, or other officer with a delegation by ordinance or resolution from the city council to file on behalf of a city. So if you're from a city, my suggestion is discuss with your city manager, director of finance, whether or not your city will plan to be the test claimant. Absent that, I encourage folks to take a look at our new education link. We have a YouTube video that's really designed for beginners with the test claim process. We recognize that not every city or county maybe is going to be a test claimant. However, we would prefer it if everyone was involved in the process, and there's several different points along the process where you can file comments so that you can introduce your costs as evidence into the record assuming a test claim on this particular legislation is filed. And again, please just give us a call. I'm Jill McGee. I'm the program analyst. I'm the person who would receive that filing once it comes in. And I'm happy to be helpful to you as much as I can be at the beginning of the process to make it as easy as possible. And if you have any specific questions, please let me know. I know it's a lot of information.
Thank you so much, Jill. That was.
Oh, I did see in the chat, can tribes file a claim? The answer to that is no. Tribes are not eligible claimants. So the eligible claimants are specific counties, cities, school districts, community college districts, or special districts. I'm not aware if it's the case that there are tribes who are also special districts. If a tribe is a special district, which is particular within, it's a particular designation that I personally am not aware how one gets to be a special district, but that is definitely a question I could answer if you want to give me a call.
Thank you very much. Okay. Well, Jill will hopefully also be available at the end in case there are any more questions. But again, thank you, Jill, so much for hopping on, and highly encourage folks to go onto the Commission on State Mandates website, look at the YouTube link, look at the other guidance. It's really very helpful. Okay. So then next we have James Sarmento, who is the Executive Director of Cultural Resources with the Shingle Springs Band of Miwok Indians. And James has kindly offered to talk to us today about California Indigenous languages and best practices as part of, again, the intent of this bill was to choose replacement names that honor tribes, tribal cultures, and Indigenous languages, which may mean that there is some learning to do on non-California Indigenous speakers as well. James, I will hand the floor over to you. I'm very excited to hear what you have to say today. If you wouldn't mind just doing a quick introduction as well.
Kasiyami, Sekasin, and Matuxis. So, hi, I greet you in Shasta language, which I'm of Shasta descent, which is Northern California, Southern Oregon. I also greet you in Nisenan and Miwok, because I am sitting at the Shingle Springs Band of Miwok Indians at their administration office today. So I just want to make sure that I'm placing myself within that. So I'm the Executive Director of the Cultural Resources Division here at Shingle Springs. I also have been a long time language, I'll say language revitalist, or somebody who works with languages to bring them back to the community. So largely with my own community, but also with multiple communities that I've worked with through time. So just excited to be here. I think really I want to just, I feel like in preparing for this, I just sort of threw a couple things that I wanted to kind of just sort of touch on, because I think that the first thought that I think everybody gets with changing names for things and doing them in an Indigenous language is that this is going to be really hard or really difficult to say, or I'm not going to be able to do that. And I think just taking a step back for a moment, that renaming areas and using those original names is important to recognizing the long history of people being on the land, and specifically those places to which you're renaming. It allows us as citizens, as well as both citizens of tribal nations as well as California citizens, allows us to really rethink and reimagine those spaces that you're presently in. Important is also like connects you to those and reconnects you to the histories of those communities. So, and it leads to other kinds of initiatives that really help to educate individuals and larger communities about, again, history, but history, language, and culture of those specific areas. So I really want to point at that as like as a real cornerstone of this and being exciting. Also, I think that that fear often of like those kinds of names is like the reality is we already use a lot of names in our from other languages when naming our streets and cities. So I live in the greater Sacramento area, and I was just like driving home the other day, and I'm like, there is um, Thor Way, Cersei's Way, Neptune Way, Vulcan Way, all these different places that are all like God of Thunder, right? Thor. I'm sure everybody's watching the Marvel movies, but like Thor's not indigenous, Cersei's not indigenous, Neptune's not, Vulcan's not, and there's lots of other like Spanish names, La Playa Way, El Camino Real, San Francisco, Los Angeles. A lot of these names are already on the landscape, so it's not just um, the that speaks to like a larger history of the area. And the truth is, we're already using indigenous names when naming streets and cities, and it often just goes unnoticed. And I was thinking because I'm again from north, my community's up north, and Wairika being the biggest city, Wairika is an indigenous name, which there's also Yosemite, Tuolumne, there's thousands of names that are indigenous to the area. So really, we're already doing this. So it's really exciting to see this as a potential avenue for language revitalization. And I was actually thinking about like, there's also like lots of signage and lots of things out there in the world that are in completely in indigenous scripts. So it's I think of um, the Great Smoky Mountains National Park as an example. Like there's signs that are dual English and Cherokee, so there's lots of potential for those kinds of spaces. And I think some of the other things and sort of talking about languages and sounds again, sort of there's concern about how sounds will be represented, and I think I fall in the space of the reality is most symbols that are being utilized either with International Phonetic Alphabet or other kinds of alphabets that are being utilized by tribes in language programs have Unicode equivalents and have equivalents that already exist in the world. So like it's actually really kind of a really fantastic space that you get to kind of see the landscape come back to life in some of these spaces. And I think that there's also like sort of larger opportunities for sort of other kinds of tribal initiatives to revitalize and reclaim languages that can come out of this. And I think that in a lot of ways, those changes back to indigenous languages or utilizing indigenous languages in landscapes, especially naming street signs or naming other kinds of spaces. I'm actually like heavily encouraged that like emergency services and other kinds of services deal with it daily and are doing great with it. And again, sort of, I would sort of put it as sort of like short-term problems are often like the difficulty of pronunciation and the immediate. The reality is like as you go through time, those pronunciations sort of you get better at it through time, and again, sort of leading to other sort of funding and tribal initiatives to revitalize and reclaim languages can assist that either in schools or other kinds of spaces. So one of the other things I also wanted to kind of speak to because there's in terms of using languages like the languages of California, there are um, a California has been since time immemorial a place of great language diversity. So it has the most amount of language families, the most amount of dialects and other kinds of things in one space, and that's just because people in the past were here and spoke multiple languages. They then thrived and did fantastic. Were able to um, survive and do lots of fantastic things. So it's just like the language diversity of California is has in the past been great and is currently great. So it's just I think in terms of like this being a language revitalization, sort of utilizing languages, I think is a fantastic space to recognize that. There's also sort of the want to point to the use of you can also use figures from tribal histories. So I think like because I'm sitting at the tribal office at Shingle Springs. Example would be they have three matriarchs. Naming after one of them would be a fantastic space to also consider. I think the big thing in terms of talking about utilizing or doing any kind of renaming is really being in consultation with tribes and how to work with tribes um, and get to the most appropriate name, and that's often difficult because it is tribes have varying capacity issues that are there. So being able to get a hold of a tribe right off the bat is going to be complicated. That being said, most tribes actively want to do these kinds of initiatives and participate as much as possible. So I think in terms of looking at language and utilizing language, it's always going to be forefronting tribal interests and tribal partners first, and working through them to see what um, the best naming convention at that point would be, whether it is a traditional name, renaming a space back to its original place name, whether it's coming up with a name in in the indigenous language that that is appropriate for that space, coming up with something brand new, or utilizing people from tribal histories that may be important on the landscape um, to really promote and really re-educate the communities about. Because I think that often tribal histories kind of they are uh, I think it was one of the things in grad school that was really telling for me was when we were talking about doing like, hey, where's the California Indian history stuff? Where are all the books on that? And those are being written right now. There's not a great there's not a big amount of books because the way that history has thought about tribes and worked with tribes to promote history hasn't hasn't been working with communities, hasn't been doing all these things. And now you have more indigenous scholars and working for masters and PhDs and in academia that you can actually consult. So the space right now is just it's a fantastic and wonderful time to be in, where you can talk with wonderful people who do tribal histories. You can talk with wonderful people who are doing tribal languages and really get to what works for that specific area. And really, I think the last thing that I wanted to kind of speak to is just really just thanking everybody who has worked on this to get to here. And I think that that's it's an incredible space to be in. It is a wonder, like it just floors me every single time, because I think it's just like these are the kinds of conversations that we're having now. Is not we don't need to talk about names and these kinds of spaces that are, you know, I think of I think SQ names are a fantastic place to start, and getting those removed and putting you know much better names out there throughout the state, throughout the country. I like to see that. I think that there's also other. This is the starting space where we're going to see the other kinds of spaces that are going to like evolve out of this. So I really just am encouraged by all the fantastic work that everybody on this has done, and really I'm going to kind of leave it there because I'm just going to do nothing but like promote and say great things. I think if there's any like questions about any of that, I'm just gonna pause and shut my mouth for a little bit. And I love this photo because it's me and my kiddo. So he would be happy to be on like definitely on a website for a little bit, and I get to show it to him later. So thank you.
Masi, thank you, James, so much for sharing that story and those perspectives. And you've kind of inspired me to start paying a little bit more attention myself to the road signs and the place names that are around me, and really taking notice of what those names are and where they come from, and what they mean, or even what they used to mean. And also just thank you for touching on that importance of remembering those who came before us, and how it's so important to, I'm putting words in your mouth, so sorry, these are probably more mine, but just the importance of remembering those who came before us to also know where we are and where we're going. So thank you for sharing those perspectives. And with that, I think I'll keep going, but hopefully if folks have questions, you can stay on the line here and we can get to them at the Q&A at the end. So thank you. Okay. So the last part of our presentation, just before Q&A, really is intended to cover next steps. So first and foremost, as we mentioned, by January 1st, 2025, which is coming up in a couple weeks here, I can't believe it, public agencies need to formally adopt a Kagan-approved replacement name. And we've sent this via email, but we are respectfully requesting that public agencies send a resolution confirming the formal adoption of a Kagan-approved replacement name. I know for some of these cases, Kagan may have approved more than one name, so those resolutions are especially important in those instances, so we know what name you selected. Then we'll hear from the California Highway Patrol here in just a second, but so to set more of the context, right? A lot of these nearly 40 places and features that were identified throughout this process were roads and street names. And so with that, obviously there's a key component of this is coordinating with emergency response and making sure that all of the digital maps as well as the on-the-ground maps are updated. We're recommending at the same time, and that folks are coordinating with the respective emergency response entities, a primary one of which is the California Highway Patrol, to make sure that all parties are on the same page so that emergency response can be swift. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Alicia Fuller and her colleagues as well, just to talk a little bit about the California Highway Patrol and coordinating with them as public agencies as you all move forward and you get ready to not only update your digital maps, but on the ground physical signage as well. Alicia, please feel free to unmute yourself. I'll hand it over.
Excellent, thank you. I just want to make sure that I've got good audio.
Yep, we can hear you.
Perfect. Thanks for giving us some time this afternoon. My name is Alicia Fuller. I'm a commander here with the California Highway Patrol. I'm overseeing our communications centers support section. And so we work directly with our communication centers, all the systems that they utilize for our 911 callers in the field directly. So I'm going to actually hand it over to my geospatial team to talk just briefly about the information that we need in order to make sure that all of our mapping systems are up to date with the new naming. But I did think of something as we were speaking today that I also want to bring up to the listeners on this webinar with regard to what you may need to do if you live on a street that has a name that is changing from an emergency services perspective. So I just want to let everybody know that we work very closely with all the 911 coordinators throughout the state in each county in California, and have monthly calls with them in which we will share this information so that each county is aware of what they may need to do internally with their own systems to make sure that their maps are also up to date. as the names change. The only thing that I can think of that you may need to do from a public perspective is if you have a voice over IP, VoIP, or IP-based phone system in your house that you use personally, when you set that up with your service provider, if they had you designate an emergency address into that system or asked you for an emergency address, once your street name changes and you've got new signage on your street, you'll need to make sure that you go in and update your own emergency address in your phone system. And if you have any questions about that, your service provider for your phone service should be able to help you understand where that information goes, so that if you are in the event of needing to call 911, the address that is seen by the 911 call taker or dispatcher is the correct updated address. And again, that is applicable to VoIP-based or IP-based telephone systems that you may or may not have in your home. But other than that, I want to hand it over to my GIS team and let them talk just for a couple of minutes about what you need to do to help with our systems. So I have Christina and Carol on this webinar, and I'll let them come off mute, give you a bit of an update in that area.
Thank you for that. My name is Christina Brunsold. I'm the GIS lead at CHP for the GIS unit. And what we are looking at in regards to the name changes is ensuring that what the cities and counties have in their data sets, as well as the physical sign that's on the street, match so that we can update our data set. We are the primary call taker for some of these rural areas, and we want to make sure that when someone, especially a non-local person, calls 911, they can look at the street sign and that will match what's in our system as well. So as the changes are being made across the state, we put our email for the GIS inbox on the slide here to go ahead and email us what that new street name is and make sure that the physical sign also matches so that we can ensure that our data sets match and align so we can provide service across the state. Until the physical street sign changes, unfortunately, we are going to have to maintain both names, or the old name, unfortunately, for a public safety aspect, to make sure that when someone is calling 911, especially if they don't know where they are, they can look at a landmark or a street sign and make that change. I will pass this over to Courtney to also talk about any of the 911 related items that I may have missed on that.
Good afternoon. My name is Courtney Lamette. I am one of the supervisors here at CHP over the CAD and GIS unit. And just mimicking what Christina said, it's very important to have these updates so the perspective of incoming 911 calls are responded to in an adequate amount of time. And we just hope to be able to get this implemented with everybody's collaboration as soon as possible.
Great. Anything else to add for folks from the CHP? Hearing none. Well, thank you, Alicia, et al., for joining us today and for explaining a little bit more about your internal processes and just the importance of coordinating with you. And again, that's something that Kagan is highly, highly recommending that public agencies coordinate with you all and endeavor to update the digital maps as well as physical signage at the same time, and maybe even kind of notify you ahead of time is what we would hope, that, you know, hey, these changes are coming down the line, we're expecting them on such and such date, so that you all are aware and everyone can sync up their data sets. So thank you for joining us today. Very much appreciated. Okay.
Thank you.
Continue with our presentation then. So along these lines, again, it's by January 1st, 2025, The replacement names need to be formally adopted through each public agency's normal renaming or naming process, and we are requesting that public agencies send us a copy of their resolution or whatever the formal documentation is so that we know the replacement name that was chosen and has been set in place to ensure consistency with Assembly Bill 2022, asking that public agencies coordinate closely with CHP, strongly recommending updating digital maps and on-the-ground features simultaneously. And then one other note, CHP is one of many different entities, and there may be others such as Caltrans, or we also have up on the slide here the U.S. Census Bureau, which sends out an annual survey. I believe it's called an annual boundary and annexation survey once a year. So we'll be working with public agencies to try to make sure, again, that maps are updated as these changes are being put in place. But there may be others. So just want to provide that caveat that especially as you all are looking at updating the physical signage, there may be other parties that should be coordinated with. And please feel free to reach out if you have any questions on that or need contact information for, let's say, Caltrans or other state agencies. We could try to help put you in touch. Okay. And with that, we have now come to the Q&A portion of this webinar. I will go ahead and exit out of this presentation in just a moment, but I want to leave these links up on the slide here. If folks do have any questions regarding Kagan, Assembly Bill 2022, these address changes, etc., please feel free to visit our website or contact us at cacgn@resources.ca.gov. And then if you have any questions regarding the signage and other local changes, we would encourage you to reach out to your responsible public agency that is associated with a particular feature or place name that's being replaced. And with that, again, just thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and exit out of this, and maybe we take 15 minutes or so for a Q&A and go from there. And again, the speakers, guest speakers, CHP, DMV, James, did I forget anyone else? Commission on State Mandates, sorry, Jill. Thank you all so much for joining. Your assistance and expertise is very much appreciated. Okay. I think we did get the Q&A feature up and running, it looks like.
Yes, the Q&A feature is up and running, and then there's people have also been putting questions in the chat. So Megan, would it be helpful for me to read some of the questions that we have?
That would be, thank you.
All right, and I see, Brett, that you have your hand raised, but you also put a question in the chat, so I hope that this is the question that you're, it looks like you have two questions here. And so the first one is, and I believe this is for Jill and the State Mandates Commission, but Brett is curious about costs incurred against individuals from insurance, mortgage companies, banks, letterheads, business cards, etc. So those costs that individuals might have to incur for a name change as it relates to this new law. Is there a space in the commission for?
The commission has no jurisdiction over individuals. We are limited to cities, counties, special districts, K-12 school districts, and community college districts, unfortunately.
Okay. And can the county represent the individuals in their costs?
A county auditor can represent the county.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Brett, hopefully that's helpful information for you. And then I see you have your second question. Does Fresno County need to go back to the community if they suggested multiple replacement names? And Megan, did you want to take the first crack at this, or would you like me to? Okay.
I'm happy to. So again, to reiterate, for the cases where Kagan approved multiple replacement names, so in some instances, a city or county submitted to us, anywhere from 2 to like 20 names to be considered, and Kagan either would have approved all of them, or some of them, or at least one of them. So for the cases where there are multiple Kagan approved names, the counties will still need to go through its normal naming, renaming process to formally adopt one of those names. And then again, we're requesting that you just inform us of which name, which Kagan approved name you ultimately chose. And hopefully that answers your question. But Geneva, I don't know if you had anything else you'd like to add.
No, that's helpful.
Okay.
And then I think the speakers were able to answer all of the other questions in the chat. But I know that Mary had a question that others might find helpful. And so the question was, what date does the street signs need to be changed? And I think those are those physical markers. And Assembly Bill 2022 provides some guidance there in section 8899.93A. And you'll see that language in the chat for folks. But essentially, a public agency, oh my goodness, shall ensure that whenever it updates a map or replaces a sign, interpretive marker, or other marker because of wear or vandalism, the new name is adopted. And so I think the author was trying to understand that public agencies have limited budgets for this type of work, but also wanted to ensure that the new names are being incorporated in the physical signs. So thank you, Mary, for that question, and hopefully that's helpful for others who are joining.
Thank you, Geneva. And then I do see kind of a question and a statement from Spencer in the Q&A. So Spencer, you asked, are we aware of any cities or counties that have produced a one-pager or flyer for residents that consolidates all of the things folks should keep in mind when their street name changes? And with that, Spencer, again, I would highly recommend going to our address change FAQ document that is on Kagan's website, because it essentially what we did was we compiled a list of entities that a member of the public, or even in some cases a public agency, may need to consider and notify when an address, thank you, Geneva, for reposting in the chat, when an address change is needed. I think that's probably going to be the closest to, it's not exactly a one pager because there are a number of entities to consider, but that is hopefully going to be a useful resource for our public agencies to utilize themselves and share with members of the public to answer those common questions that we've received.
Thank you. And then we have another question from Brett in the chat. And thank you, Brett, for this question. And this is relating to the renaming of the unincorporated community in Fresno County from SQ Valley to Yokuts Valley. And the reason why that process was different than this process that we're talking about here today is because the unincorporated communities naming process is actually under federal jurisdiction, not state jurisdiction. And so SQ Valley went through that renaming process through Secretary Order 3404 and the federal renaming process. The Assembly Bill 2022 renaming are for places that are under state and local jurisdiction, and that's why you're seeing a different process. I hope that's helpful background information for folks joining us here today.
Great. You wait one more second here just in case there are any final questions, but again, definitely don't want to unnecessarily take up folks' time. I think while we wait for any last questions, any of our panelists, was there anything else that maybe you thought of as we were chatting that you want to mention before we end this webinar? Okay, hearing none. Well, thank you again, everyone, so much for joining today. I know it's a Friday, it's getting close to the holidays, and it was right after lunch, so I really appreciate your time and energy and thoughts. And just, again, thank you to everyone who contributed to this effort in implementing Assembly Bill 2022. If you are a public agency or even a member of the public or a tribal representative, again, please do not hesitate to reach out to us at Kagan if you have any questions, and we will do our best to get you that information if we have it, or try to connect you with someone who does have it. So, okay, I will go ahead and close out the webinar now, but have a lovely rest of your day and a great weekend. Thank you, everyone. Bye.